If you ever run into a pappy rouster, beware. You're facing a twin threat, a notorious criminal on the one hand and a Cincinnati curiosity.
As the holidays approach, shoppers today are on the lookout for shoplifters, scammers, pickpockets, and porch pirates. Time was Cincinnatians had to beware of porch climbers, molly buzzers, pappy rousters, and other oddly named rapscallions. A porch climber, also known as a roof walker, was a burglar who climbed a porch to gain access to the upper floors so he could rob the house, usually while the family were at supper or otherwise engaged downstairs. The streets of Cincinnati were crowded with several varieties of pickpockets. One was the molly buzzer, who specialized in robbing women. A typical molly buzzer, often aided by an accomplice, edged up to a woman in a crowd, grabbed her purse, and ran off. The pappy rouster was commonly found among the hangers-on at circuses and traveling shows. These crooks robbed older men or country bumpkins by surrounding them in a crowd and deftly cleaning out their pockets before they could call for help. The gopher man was a safe cracker, also known as a yeggman, but especially a bank robber who gained access to the safe by tunneling into the vault room from a next-door building. A particular type of shoplifter, the penny waiter, specialized in thefts from jewelry stores. The penny waiter would often bring a cheap imitation piece into the store, walk off with an expensive item, and leave the imitation in its place. A grafter of any type was a thief. But the stiff grafter, also known as a funeral dip, was a pickpocket who specialized in stealing from mourners attending funerals. The panel worker was not a carpenter. Rather, it was a thief who hid in a hotel room, sometimes in a closet, but often in a compartment covered by a panel of wainscoting. When a prostitute lured a customer into the room, the panel worker emerged and confronted the embarrassed victim if awake, or picked his pockets if asleep. The short worker dodge had nothing to do with height. A pickpocket or robber was said to work the shorts if he specialized in robbing passengers on the streetcars.
And right now, I want to welcome our good buddy, Greg Hand. Greg, so good to have you here.
Always a pleasure.
So, did criminals get away with these crimes in Cincinnati?
It was amazing how much crime took place in Cincinnati, and yes, people got away with it. You have to remember that at this time, there were no such thing as crosswalks. There were no such things as automobiles, that sort of thing. Everybody walked at the same time. The sidewalks were crowded. The streets were crowded. If you were a pickpocket, you could pick a pocket and get away before anybody could see you. The newspapers are filled with reports of crimes from people's pockets, from people's houses, from stores, that sort of thing. Yes, this was a very lawless town.
Why were there so many pickpockets here?
As I said, it was a crime of opportunity. If you're crammed into a crowd moving through the city, you've got the ability to reach into somebody's pocket. And if you look at the costuming at the time, people, even during the summer, are wearing layers of clothing. And so you're not going to feel somebody reaching into your pocket. There's kind of a joke now about women's dresses having pockets. And back then they did. And yet they were pockets in a layer that was underlain by petticoats and furbelows and all the under things. And so you could, again, pull a pocket without anybody noticing.
And what about the police? Did they have any tips on avoiding or preventing crime?
It's really interesting to look into criminology back in the late 1800s. There was a guy in France named Alphonse Bertillon, who was one of the early adopters of measuring criminals. And so he was one of the first people to pick up on fingerprints. He photographed criminals. He did their height, weight, that sort of thing. And detective agencies issued books of wanted posters that they sold to storekeepers, banks, that sort of thing, with pictures of the criminals. Interestingly, while those books have very, very detailed, very fine portraits of these nasty folks, the newspapers, when they heard that somebody is in town, did a cheap and quick rendering of the person and published pictures that looked almost exactly nothing like them and said, watch out for this guy, he's in town. And you see this all the time. It must have been a free-for-all here.
This one was fascinating, Greg, and as always, good to have you here.
Be safe.